Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast, hosted by Joshua Shaw and Ryan Buckeye.
What up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages? That is a D-Generation X intro, and I don't even know if you know that, Josh. Pro wrestling, baby. It's back with no audience, just like the rest of the world. Josh Shaw, Ryan Buckeye here. Everybody's like, okay, 2020, the year of COVID, the year of killer bees, the year of no fireworks, the year of Josh Shaw became richer than ever. But 2020 really, for like looking around at sports nutrition, there's been quite a bit of rebrands in the space. I mean, or at least like, I shouldn't say quite a bit, but there's been at least to mind, I mean, Core rebranded their entire portfolio, Muscle Tech, IOV just rebranded their entire portfolio. And maybe now's the time to do it. Maybe you've had all this time to sit there and think about what your next move is going to be. You put your product releases on hold. And I mean, there are a lot of brands out there that have been or have had the same look for many years. And it's funny though, because like, what's the rule of thumb? Like, how often should you rebrand? Do you want to, and I don't mean this in a negative way. I've worked with the brand before. I like him. Him and I are friends. Moby at Olympus. They rebranded like 3 times in 5 years. That's not what you do. Like, you don't do that. But, and he knows that. And I think hopefully they're done doing what they're doing. But how often, Josh, would you recommend a brand to rebrand, if at all?
I guess it depends on the success rate or like what's going on in the business if it's doing well, because you do need some continuity to like the look, especially if you are on shelf at a lot of like brick and mortar retailers. Right. That usually creates kind of a longevity thing because people want to have that same look. And when you do change things over, retailers sometimes ask you to take the old stuff off the rack. Sometimes you have like this weird thing where like 20 or 30% of the retailers still have the old stuff and then they have the new stuff. And then like, how do they put it in there? It creates a mess.
Keep in mind, I want to make a point on that because it's super funny. Like, we rebranded at Cascadian Farmers at Mills. It was $1 million rebrand. These things are not cheap, first off. People need to understand, like, when you rebrand, the printer has to print new plates. I mean, there's just a lot that goes into it. And then that point, like the old stock. Honestly, if I'm a consumer and I walk into a retail store and I see old brand and new brand, I'm buying the new brand. Why would I buy the old brand? Unless the old brand contained like DMAA or some crazy stimulant that I was obsessed about, I'm buying the new brand. So like a lot of times like Walmart or Target would come to me and be like, yeah, but what about all this old stuff? We'll sell through it. I mean, it's the same product inside the box. It just looks different. But even on my butter line, which is funny, like we're not changing the look at all. The look and the colors, everything is staying the same, but we've added tactiles and textures to the label. And everybody's asking us when they can get their hands on that. It's really, I mean, I'm excited about it because it's like a little feature that I think is cool. And yes, I fully admit I stole that from Ghost and took it out of their page. But it's like, people are like, can I get that instead? Well, but I got to go through my old stuff first. Like, I have inventory of old labels that I'm going to print and put on bottles first. The labels don't make it a better product, but the perception sometimes is like, right? The perception is like, we want the new, and we don't want to deal with the old. So have you been involved in the rebrand? I'm thinking that your time at Musclepharm, you guys had the same kind of brand that whole time, didn't you?
Right when I came on board, we were doing the changeover to like the high contrast, like lime green, and then the black and the white. So before that, it was kind of like the Ed Hardy look to it. Like I don't know how to describe it, but it had like weird chains and odd colors and stuff to it. So did? Yeah. So like prior,
because I don't know if I've ever seen it.
It's
Oh God, this is awful.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
Holy shit.
So people ask a lot of times, like, why did that company explode? There was a ton of different reasons, but one of it was because of a very beautiful rebrand that was at the time, if you look at that from the context of 2011, that was like far and away something totally different. So when that was on shelf, people were like grabbing that thing like it was worth a ton of money.
Night and day difference. Like Assault had red on it. Like this must be Fruit Punch or something for a color block. Maybe not. I don't know. Bulletproof. Like what was Bulletproof?
Bulletproof was nighttime. I think sleep aid.
Okay. I don't know if the name goes with it, but okay. Combat powder. That's still there. Okay. Yeah. You guys definitely did a massive like kudos on the.
They were like the OGs of like what Redcon 1 does with like the military stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of the old legacy products, they all had names that were like that.
God, if you're listening to this podcast, do yourself a favor and Google Assault Musclepharm Old. Like, this is just a terrible label. God. All right, so you're involved in that. How much did that cost the company?
Ooh, a lot of money.
Yeah.
The exact amount, it was probably close to what you were saying in terms of like when you're putting in all the hours, plus you're putting in all of like discounting and things to get things off shelf and whatever. I mean, it was up there in terms of probably in the $1 million range.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the thing too. Like, you have to discount your current stock too. But like, hey, we got to move on. And there's nothing wrong with the product, nothing at all. But just because the look is different, you have to discount it. Did you guys use a design agency, or did you guys do everything in house?
I believe it was somebody in-house, and then he had transitioned to an agency, but he had worked, I think he owned an agency before that, and then kind of transitioned in-house and then back out of house.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, that's cool that you're involved. I mean, you and I both involved in different rebrands. Obviously, you within sports nutrition, me on larger CPG. But I mean, you've probably been involved in rebrands maybe through your consulting business as well. Yeah,
I mean, I can't even count how many of them, honestly. But I mean, it's interesting because this topic, at least when I brought it up, it was kind of inspired because of Muscle Techs. And it's kind of a funny story because I had gotten some just random text messages from an industry colleague about the rebrand before it kind of got posted or whatever. And I thought, wow, this is cool. I said, and I was thinking back, like, when was the last time they did a rebrand? And it just so happened that one of their C-suite members, Brian Kavanaugh, that used to be at GNC, and he's, I think, maybe their chief commercial officer at Iovate, he had messaged me recently and said, hey, we haven't talked in a while. I want to kind of explain to you what we did with this rebrand. And he referenced an old article that I honestly forgot about from July of, I think, 2016, where I called out Muscle Tech for needing to rebrand their products. And he said, it's a long time coming, but, he's like, perfection takes a lot of time or something, funny. And then that's what kind of inspired me to kind of think about just rebrands in general, because I think if you take a look at a lot of like the legacy sports nutrition brands, you can see that a lot of them probably are in need of tightening up the brand, rebrand, drastic or whatever. And to your point earlier, like, is this the time to do it? Maybe. It all kind of depends on, if they have the resources in house, the budget, things like that. But I think just thinking about that is probably a key thing to do right now, especially when, you're not able to probably sell as much and have a lot of those resources be spent in that way. You can be thinking about something that is probably useful that maybe you can deploy for the start of 2021.
What did you think? I mean, the old Muscle Tech had colors across the board. I mean, they just use, like Nitrotech, for instance, like they had predominantly like a red, black, but then they all of a sudden they hit you with a blue with their whey, so they kind of didn't have any sort of like synchronicity. I don't know if that word works here, like across the stuff. I mean, their new rebrand, if you guys haven't seen it, like cheap plug for Fitness Informant, like we just posted on it today. It's more of a silver chrome look. It looks like a family. It actually looks like they belong on the same brand. Like the other stuff, I thought there was some kind of disconnect between some of them. Do you like the overall new look?
I haven't like dove into it completely, and I haven't had a chance to kind of talk to Brian and like understand a little bit of the logic behind some of the elements of it. But I think if you're comparing it to what used to be, I think it's much better.
It's much different.
I think it's always, you can nitpick, and I think anybody can. They can nitpick even the best labels out there. But I think that if you're comparing it to what was there previously, I think it's far and away better than what they had before.
Yeah, I think they had before. I think they had a couple brand assets that they stayed the same. Now it seems like maybe they actually have a brand asset guideline book that they have to follow with some of the stuff. I mean, the text is the same across the board, logo usage, everything. I mean, it looks good, but for me, I was like surprised that I didn't know they were doing it until obviously now we work with Muscle Tech a bit too, and I'm excited that they're doing this and they're actually putting more effort into their formulations of their product. But it's very different than what they had. I mean, if anything, they had a platinum series on Muscle Tech. They kind of took a page out of that and kind of incorporated that chrome look into the new stuff here, at least into the elite series that I'm looking at here. I thought they did a good job with that. But the question, I guess, the topic of conversation of this podcast is like, which brand should be next to do it? And Josh, you and I both said, like, I think if you rebrand once every 5 years, actually. I mean, if you can do a good job, you shouldn't have to rebrand more than once every 5 years and only rebrand if you're forced to. There's a company, I mean, look at Redcon, right? Like Redcon, I think that's their branding. They own that. That is Redcon. I don't see them having a need to rebrand. Now, With that said, they did rebrand an element of their portfolio, though, recently in their MRE bars, right? They went from the black labels, which was kind of a hardcore bodybuilding-esque, to more colorful and usage and family-friendly labels of their MRE bar. So if anybody hasn't seen that, have you seen that?
I have, yeah.
I think that.
And it's
that
funny
was
that
a
you
smart choice.
mentioned.
It's
funny you mentioned Rincon One because I actually had them on a list to not necessarily like rebrand, but to make a more cohesive brand family. Like they have the kind of ready to eat and ready to drinks going in a certain direction, which makes sense for like where they're going in terms of placement and retail. But then a lot of their powders and things are also going in that direction. So then you start to have this issue where the labels currently they're kind of not set up very well for like some of the food, drug, mass convenience, at least in my opinion. I think that the colors and like the way that they use black on black and like it's just kind of tough to see like from far away. And it's, for me, I think it's just a matter of like maybe tightening up a lot of the elements and making them kind of cohesive across the board. But I still think, they obviously have a very strong brand and people love it. And, this is, again, probably me just nitpicking. But I think if you're going to look at this, and they came out in 2016. So, I mean, they're getting to that point where it makes sense to maybe do a complete refresh. If it is towards the ready to drink and the ready to eat type look, fold that into the whole lineup.
It'll be, because Aaron texted me one time and said, you and Josh should have me on the podcast and talk about branding. So, I mean, it's kind of funny that we're talking about this topic and talking about Aaron's and Redcon One. I mean, I think their black on black is very Redcon-esque, but if you are talking food, drug, mass, like bigger retailers, I don't know if it's going to work. I mean, it's not. I don't know. It's just tough. Like I said, I like it for Redcon, and it seems like, I mean, you look at their swag, you look at their branding on their website, it's pretty consistent. But now, like the MRE bars and then the MRE RTDs that are going to come out, they're going to be branded with color. More flavor cues for it. So you'll have that sort of portion, and then you'll have their Total Wars and their GI juices and stuff. So it'd be interesting to see when they do, if they do, because the element of the military that they embed into their brand. It's like, how do you still maintain that? And they definitely could do it. Another brand like that I think won't rebrand for a while is like, when we talk about all the time, Ghost. I can't see Ghost rebranding because like that is Ghost brand. You have people copying them at this point. So, but who knows? Dan and Ryan have a mind of their own. So maybe in 3 years after they start, these beverages come out and people have seen the renders of the citrus flavor. I've seen the renders of a different flavor. I'm sure you probably have too. It's phenomenal. Maybe they'll switch it up, but I don't think a brand like Ghost needs to even have that conversation. I mean, it should always be maybe a topic of conversation, like once a year or something, but like it's not something I don't think they have to actively be thinking about. But there are, I think Core needed to. When Core rebranded this year, I think that was a great rebrand. I thought their black was, quite frankly, kind of boring. I didn't think it stood out on the shelf. And I think the white does a much better job of conveying what they're about as a brand. And it seems like the white line, you could call it, has been, I mean, granted, it's COVID, but it seems like it's been doing better. And I think it's crazy that you could put the same formula in a different container, but then people get excited about it because it just looks different on the exterior.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just human nature probably to get excited about something new. And regardless if it's a new formula or not, I think that people are attracted to different things and maybe it makes them feel a different way. So then they're interested in buying it. I haven't seen too much from like an activity level on people's sentiment on it. But for me, I think it looks much cleaner and it looks like it's much more composed than what you had previously. Not that it was terrible, but like you said, it was kind of just, it didn't stand out in front of a group of competitors on the shelf.
What about a brand that owns a particular color? That's a tough one. Like BSN, right? I mean, they kind of own red. I mean, there's probably some other brands that have red too, but BSN really is like red. I mean, when you rebrand in that case, it's tough because you obviously, like for MuscleTech, right? If you guys were to rebrand again, you'd want to incorporate the lime green. You guys did a good job of incorporating that lime green throughout the entire package from the logo. But BSN right now has like their entire containers are red. Their logo has like the yellow and black and red around it. That's a more difficult rebrand because you want to obviously maintain that ownership of that color. And then a rebrand could alienate current consumers because they don't know who the fuck you are at that point, right? Like they might not be able to recognize who you are on shelf.
I can remember recently, and I think they reverted back, but MHP, they owned kind of that royal blue and yellow kind of like color scheme. And then they went to like a completely different look and it fell flat on its face. And then I think the old owner came back and then reverted back to the yellow and blue. But I think it took a lot of time, and that probably created a lot of confusion. And they do a lot of their sales internationally, so that probably also caused a bunch of confusion with some of those partners. And a lot of times that people, they're not up to the news as we are, like in Americans, and paying attention to Stacked or you guys or Price Plow and just knowing like all the little intricacies of like the news. A lot of times over there, they're just like, where did this brand go? They probably didn't even realize that it changed. It was probably a new brand to them.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. And then I want to touch on one more brand here that rebranded. They started to rebrand last year, and they're kind of rebranding now in 2020. But you might be familiar with them, you might not be. But 5% Nutrition, obviously hugely attached to Rich Piana. He's been gone for a while, and they've finally kind of starting to move away from that a little bit. Took a little bit longer, I think, than they needed to. But they were black, they were hardcore. I mean, if anybody watched Rich's channel, that's hardcore as hardcore gets, man. He was talking about cycles and everything between the sun. But now their new labels and their new colors are white, a lot more inviting, they're pretty cool. But I think that's something that, in that company, when you're tied to a personality and that personality leaves the company or ends up, in this case, passing away, you need to think differently, and you can't maintain that. So I thought they did a decent job. A brand that I would like to see rebrand, and they're kind of doing it a little bit. And I wouldn't say this isn't like a massive rebrand, but what NutriBio just did with their 4th of July, using some caricatures, using some sort of quote-unquote marketing, some color on their containers. And they've done it a little bit, too, with some of their flavor launches. I think it adds a little bit more excitement to it because, NutriBio is black and lime green. Everybody knows like what it looks like, but it's not – it doesn't sell itself on a shelf, man. I'm not walking – and Mark knows this. I'm not walking by a NutriBio product as an unknown and picking that up and putting it in my cart. It just doesn't look cool. To me, it's not like – the cool thing to grab. Now, once you understand the company and what they're about and what they do, now it's cool. But you need a sales rep or somebody to explain that to you, or you have to do that research. But primarily on packaging alone, that's a tough sell. It's a very tough sell for if somebody walks in to Vitamin Shop or GNC or just Mom and Pa's supplement shop looking for a pre-workout, and they have pre-extreme. That might be enough for me to pick it up because it says extreme, but like their pre, it's not exciting to me because I don't know anything about, at this point, I don't know anything about ingredients. All I'm looking for is like, what's a cool looking package? And at that point, I'm picking up, Ghost Legend, or I'm picking up the new Glaxon because that's kind of a cool brand that they have. So I'd like to see them do a little bit more. I'm not saying go away from their core colors, but I do like what they've done with their Freedom series that just came out. I do like the usage of caricatures a little bit more, and I think they could do a lot more fun things. And I think with Eric there, they probably will test the waters a little bit more. They're allowed to, like, just because you're a science company. I hate using that because I don't think that's 100% true, but like doesn't mean you can't have fun.
Yeah, one of the, I guess, like vertical integrations within NutriBio is that they have their in-house printing, but that has limitations, obviously, and you can't, add a bunch of the funky layers and textures and things like that because that's not the printers and things that they have. So if they were going to maybe just clean it up and maybe get it a little bit fancier for a lot of their retail shelves, that might be an idea, but they'd have to move away from the in-house printing, which is it worth it? I don't know, because a lot of the sales at this point are moving digitally anyway, so it's not necessarily something that is as important as it was before, and every day it becomes less important. So it's like, do you change over your complete business? I know they're doing that ethics line or whatever, that's probably going to have a bunch of that kind of funky stuff in there. But I think for the NutriBio line, is it worth it? I don't know.
I mean, it's been the same
it's kind
look.
of,
I mean, you've been in Mark's office, and you can see like the iterations throughout the years. Hasn't changed much. I mean, they're early stuff to now, yeah. But I mean, over the last 10 years, it hasn't changed a lot. And again, not saying it has to. I'm just saying, like, even on a digital shelf, if I'm scrolling through, I'll just say Amazon or whatever, right? Like, it doesn't pop off to me. But then again, once you buy in the NutriBio and believe in NutriBio, you don't buy anything else. So I mean, but again, that's an education-based company. They don't base their sales on marketing, they base it on education. But it'd be cool. I think it'd be like, even seeing these caricatures over the 4th of July, I think shocked some people because they just didn't expect it from NutriBio. And I think people just picked up that the Miss American Pie, seeing a young female, barely any clothes on the front of a container, kind of cool for NutriBio. Just a little different, very American-esque, and I think they did a really good job with it.
Yeah, it has
Why are
like
you
kind of
smiling
vibes.
so big when I'm talking about Miss America?
No, I'm just
Pie?
thinking about like those types of characters I think played into like knowing more about Mark now and like being very big into like the Harley lifestyle and bike and like all that. I feel like a lot of that probably was some inspiration from some of the things that you see like in tattoo parlors and things like that. Some of those that style. So I think it was unique. Maybe that'll be put into something else in the future, like some other ideas or something. But I like when there is some personality, especially when the entrepreneur is out in front of the brand anyways. Mark, not as much as some other people, but I think that when you do get to see some personality, it's cool. Regardless if it's something that's a mainstay on the brand or just kind of a special edition type of a thing. I guess I'll mention a few that I'd like to see before we kind of mention, or at least I mentioned maybe a few that I liked recently or are starting to come out now. You did mention BSN. I do think that's something that needs to happen, just because I think they need to.
They need a lot more than a rebrand.
Yeah, we talked about that a bunch of times, and I know I pick on them a lot in my channel too. But it's one of those things where I think they need to go back to that edginess, and whatever they need to do to get to that point, that's where they need to go with this. So I know they are fully looking at that, but I think that if they're going to make a move, they're going to have to be aggressive. I think you don't leave the red, but I think you need to go back to like what that cool factor was before. Take some chances. Probably create something that doesn't look like anybody else's stuff, like something that really is going to be maybe 5 years from now that people are going to copy. Like you have to take that chance, even if you fall on your face. What's the other side of it? I mean, they're just going to keep plugging away and whatever. I think you take that swing because you have other brands, especially like Optimum. Just kind of mentioned that. I think they went through a kind of a rebrand, but it just kind of a cleaning up, which I liked because I think a lot of the elements they had before were like dated. A lot of like the certain glosses and like certain metallics and things that they had like left over from like previous iterations. I think they did a good job at just kind of like cleaning it up a little bit, making the renders look a lot better for digital and things that they needed to do. Not that that was like drastic, but I think sometimes simplicity is important. I think that people want to go full bore. And when you have a, $500 million plus brand, you really can't rock the boat that much because you can really screw up a lot of sales if you go out and try to do something crazy. And Optimum's not really trying to be like the coolest thing ever. That's just quality brand that's priced effectively and things of that nature. But another one, and we talked about it just because I work there, but Musclepharm. I think that at this point they have like gotten away from what made them special, similar to like BSN. If you want to kind of look at a parallel storyline, those two are pretty good to look at. And they've always followed the leader in terms of each other. BSN was kind of before and then Musclepharm. So you can kind of see what's going to happen. If you look at BSN now, you can kind of see what Musclepharm is going to kind of come up against here soon. So I'd like them to kind of clean up their brand and kind of, again, own the green again, but like go back to like what was super special about Musclepharm. They've kind of lost that. They've eroded at it. They've kind of it's mixed matched all over the place and things like that. So those are kind of areas or ones that I kind of looked at. And one more that didn't mention is like Cellucor, because they're at this kind of crossroads now where you have like the C4, which is becoming its own sub brand, its own hero SKU. And like, how do you break that out? How do you make that look special, make that look unique, but then also have the rest of the brand's products kind of fit in there? And you have like all kinds of different styles that seem to be kind of coming up there. You have like the dynasties and this and that and all these kind of things, but they all look differently. And I think that to me, it's just kind of odd and clunky. So especially for a brand that's that big, you need to figure out a way to compose that all together and make it streamlined, because if somebody gets into the brand maybe with the drink, then they're not going to necessarily know how, like, oh, is this the powder? Is this the same brand? It just creates these confusions in people's minds.
Yeah, and then they're across the board with colors too. I mean, they have like their ultimate, which is black, and then they have C4, which is yellow. I mean, it's just, I think that C4 is yellow, And then they create like these sublines, which are different colors. It's confusing. It's funny because a lot of times the brands that we're going to call out are big brands that we've called out just for being more complacent too in the past. And not to say C4 or Cellucor's been complacent because they've done some pretty cool stuff, but it's just been maybe a little bit of complacency on their older SKUs that's still very important to their portfolio that look drastically different than all this new stuff they're coming out with. So, recently like their C4 Smart Energy, which I think is one of the best energy drinks in the market, if I have one of those, I don't tie that to C4, the original at Costco, like the yellow. I don't see that connect there. A couple other brands that we talk about simplicity sometimes works. Like you look at Cage Muscle, they're very simple, but it's also kind of dated in what they do in colors.
Yeah.
Jim. Jim has been Jim for, I don't think Jim stands off the page to me. One that's simplistic, that's very simplistic that I think still works really well is Dymatize. However, I think from what Dymatize was anyway, if you guys remember the old Dymatize, to what they are now, it's clean. It's very clean, which I like, and I feel like they own sort of that white and I don't know, you call it blue or like an off blue that they have like the 50-50 on it. But they also use a little bit of red and gray though too, so they are a little inconsistent sometimes in what they do. But overall, I think they rebranded probably 5 years ago, huh? Dymatize.
They had a rebrand that fell on its face, and it was like very short lived. I don't even think it really even hit all the products. Like they changed it real quick to the current one that it is now. But there was like this short term one. I think it was like a blue green type look to it. Very a different color than what they're using now. And the layouts were different and everything. But I think they stumbled a little bit right around the time when Post bought it. There was kind of a changeover, and then I think that didn't work. And then now they went over to this new look. And like you said, there's some inconsistencies. Again, I think it's because it's probably the portfolio's like secondary focus. A lot of the focus is just Premier Protein, the drinks. So if you have your creative staff, you're like, do I want to give the resources to Dymatize or just keep plugging away? Probably what's happening there. That's a lot of times what happened was a lot of these bigger brands we're picking on is because, they're complacent, but it's also like the complexity of their business has gotten out of hand and they weren't able to really like wrangle it in correctly. So then they're just getting to point complacent or just kind of lazy in certain areas of like not checking it to the fullest extent of like, oh, does this actually meet the brand standards to the exact level? And that even noticeable, like even more in terms of like social media posts and everything. You start to they get real messy when they start to get in that world, because if you can't get the packaging clean, you're going to struggle in all these other like more kind of at the moment type of marketing things.
You mentioned that you'd like to see BSN kind of go back to their edgy roots, and a brand that's been sort of at their edgy roots and has not changed is Universal. And I think it's one of the most boring looking brands on the market. It's been the same thing for 10 years. Like Animal Pack, I think, hasn't changed since I've been using it, and I just think it scares people off. I just don't. It's not approachable. I don't know how many hardcore bodybuilding people even turn to this brand to buy it. Obviously, they're still in business, and it'd be cool to maybe Eric at NutraBio now. At NutraBio, he was there, and obviously not with NutraBio. But to me, it's just like I'm looking at a Google Images layout of this, and I'm like, I can't believe this. It's 2020, and this still exists. Like this look still exists today in 2020.
Yeah, a lot of that. I think family-owned business there, probably just not interested in change too much. Not rocking the boat. A lot of their sales, I think, are international. So again, when you start to like peg yourself to those things, you don't want to make changes because it just confuses a bunch of different markets. And that's just kind of the brand life cycle. A lot of times you get into that kind of mature phase and kind of on the outskirts of like, the brand kind of not living much longer. You start to just milk it for what it's worth. And not to say that, Animal Pack or Universal is going out of business, but just that's where you are in like the life cycle of the brand. And you can try to revert back to a couple of the earlier phases, but that creates a ton more risk, ton more work, tons more, you have to fundamentally change a lot of the things you do on a day-to-day basis. And that's not all that exciting for some people that just want to kind of ride it out into the sunset.
Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about, I think the growing, market for, RTDs and ready-to-eats. So like your protein bars and your protein drinks. The two big protein drinks in stores are Premier. You mentioned them earlier, and then Muscle Milk. How do you feel overall about their branding?
I think Premier's it's boring, but I think it can't be exciting for like the market they're going after. So I think it fits for what they're going for. It's just very bland, which I think for introducing a new product into homes, maybe that works out well. I think Muscle Milks actually might even be going through a rebrand right now, or at least a refresh. They're a lot more like, I think they take the counter to Premier. Like theirs is like a lot more like sporty because I think of the heritage of the brand.
Right.
But it's, you have a lot of blacks and you have a lot of like just looks very male to me. And I think just Muscle Milk in general, the name speaks male to me. The muscle name, I don't know. I mean, I think that's probably just me speaking out loud, but to me, I've always kind of had a more feeling towards a male-centric brand there over Premier, which I think is both gender neutral.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I look at what Slim Fast did when they got acquired, and I thought they did a really nice job of refreshing. I wouldn't consider that a total rebrand, but it looks nice. It's clean. It's, I mean, they have RTDs too. So I think, if I put that in their three, Slim Fast almost looks like the nicest. Premier, I think, is really good. I actually do. I think for, like you mentioned, for simplicity purposes and for being introduced to homes maybe for the first time. And then Muscle Milk has been Muscle Milk for a while. It'll be interesting if you mentioned they're doing a refresh. I'm kind of interested to see what that looks like. I think that'd be good because, I mean, I haven't seen or heard anything on that, but that'll be.
Yeah, I thought I caught it on one of the social medias, like just some things I think they were tinkering at PepsiCo was kind of doing some things with it. I don't know when that was kind of coming out. Since we're talking about like drinks and shakes, I did want to kind of throw some love towards a brand that we don't talk about much, but we probably should, and the industry doesn't talk about nearly enough, is Alani Nu. Oh, yeah. They are coming out with a new rebrand across the board, but it's first being seen through their kind of fit snacks and their energy drinks. So you're starting to see them pop up now at Kroger, at Target, at whatever, and they're going in with that look, and then the rest of the brand is.
I thought their look was actually pretty effective that they had.
Oh, their look was. I think their look was great. I mean, but I think that. Again, I think they're trying to push the limits. They have some creative people there that probably want to push the limits a little bit, similar to like Ghost. They could change things up. I mean, not to say they have to, but they could because they want to consistently like kind of push the limits. And I think Alani Nu, that new look, I think is I like it. I think it's special. I think that it works for like where they're going now, and I think it further kind of draws into very female-centric buyers that don't get spoken to in those categories. So I think it'd be pretty interesting to see how that works out in some of these like very large retail channels.
I don't think I've seen it. I mean, I've seen, I guess, like on GNC's website now, they have a new energy drink called Tropicycle, which is a totally different look. The can is.
Yeah, I mean, that's the look. That's the look that's going over. And then they also have like a gummy snacks and maybe a protein bar, something else, but they're starting to kind of use those ready to eat, ready to drink as the vehicle, and then everything else is going to fall in the line.
Yeah, this is cool. I mean, actually, I liked what they had. I think this is better. I mean,
yeah,
what they had I thought was super effective. So, yeah, we probably, I mean, in terms of branding, they knock it out of the park. And like, I did mention Glaxion on here too. They just have a unique, differentiated brand that we've never really seen before. And I think that was cool and unique and different. I mean, there's like some elements of Space Jam and some other stuff within their products. Good for them. A brand doing their own thing. So I would be interested to hear what people think too out there. If you're a brand owner, let us know even if it's off the record, let us know if you're working on a refresh and rebrand, because it'd be interesting for us to know and kind of just see the direction that you're going. That's kind of where I've spent a lot of time. Josh has spent a lot of time on that too, and brand is super important. And you can do what businesses have done where they maybe rebrand, they fall flat on their face and have to revert, whether it be MHP or even Dymatize when they did. It happens. But if you're not willing to take the risk to get there, you might be stuck in the past anyway. So any words of wisdom for any brands considering a rebrand, Josh, as we close off the show?
I mean, the only one is just kind of taking this in a different direction is that I think there's other elements to think about other than just, how pretty it looks and colors and whatever. I think this is a perfect time to look at things like functionality of packaging, sustainability of packaging. Also, like this isn't necessarily the case in sports nutrition because there's not a long like heritage and legacy of these brands. But if a food and beverage brand is thinking about maybe taking some of that away and stripping it, around this cancel culture that's going on right now, this is a good time. Yeah, this is the time to like look at all of that. And I think if you're looking at just changing over some colors and textures and things like that, you could probably take it a few steps further. Just kind of go through that process, cost things out, see how things are going. Because I think, especially like sustainability, and then maybe some functionality to it, like you have premiums that you could put onto that if you can tell that story.
Right.
I just think that a lot of times you go into like a laziness thing. We've talked about that before with some of the entrepreneurs. So if you're going through this crazy thing, you might as well go full force with it,
Love it, dude. All right, if you guys like what you heard here, you can check us out on Facebook. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, everywhere. You can check us out. It's 2 guys, 1 shaker cup at J. Shaw Consulting. I have a couple different platforms. I don't need to plug them. But again, any comments, leave them on there until next week, Josh. Good stuff. I'm excited now to see if the rebrands excite me. They just excite me, and I think and they excite consumers too. So not like urging people to go out and like spend $1 million and do a rebrand because for rebrand's sake, but if it's on your radar, just do it and put a lot of thought into it. There's a lot that goes into it, and it shouldn't just be a decision you make like that.